Jai Jain, everyone. Welcome to Worldwide Virtual Classroom. This is session number 29, and we're talking about case of depression. We did start discussing depression last time. We talked about the scenario of depression, what the symptoms are, and then what type of thinking a person goes through when he or she is in depression. Different type of kashas, no kashas, and then also what type of wrong beliefs he perceives at that time and wrong knowledge he perceives at that time, and then what type of external behavior possibly could take place in that state. So then today we are just going to continue our discussion from then on. So as we were talking about Pritesh, what I was mentioning is that first thing that occurs in this particular type of depression is basically a feeling of grief, sadness because of the death of the loved one. So that event, death of the loved one, is a limit. Yes, I agree with that because that's external to it. But that feeling that occurred due to the death of loved one, which is a grief, that's a precursor, a previous stage. That person passes through it and eventually that becomes intense, then we term it as a depression.
Right.
So, in my opinion, in this particular type of cases of depression, a person will first experience grief or sadness. Only when it becomes intense, then we term it to depression. So, person always passes through this stage, and if it doesn't stop it, if it doesn't come out of it, then we term it as a depression at one time. This is a precursor. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Hello, Pritesh. You there?
You couldn't hear me? Yeah, hello? Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you say?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, external circumstances are the limit, but the feeling in itself is what person is going through in itself. So it is not it can be called limit. It's actually person's own individual effort at that time. So that's death of the loved one, which is a limit, but then feeling, which is a precursor. Then when that feeling becomes intense, that's a depression in itself. The earlier stages of depression is a grief or sadness. So another thing I want to discuss here is medical science. So I was researching the causes of depression as well, according to medical science. So I found this article in WebMD. Not sure if I'm referring to credible sources or not, but you can tell me if not. But here are some of the causes that they mention here. So abuse, past physical, sexual, emotional abuse can cause depression. Then certain medications, drugs such as Accutane or antiviral drug interferon alpha, or all these drugs. I don't know. You may know more about it. They may increase your risk of depression. That's what they said. Then the conflict, personal conflicts for disputes with the family members. And the next is what we are discussing now: death or loss of a loved one. Then a genetic history, family history of depression may increase the likelihood. Then the major events in life, such as starting a new job or getting married, lead to depression. Probably this is related to stress, of stress of and then other personal problems such as social isolation due to mental illness, or being cast out of family or social group can lead to depression. Then serious illnesses. Sometimes depression can coexist with a major illness or reaction to the illness. And then finally, substance abuse. 30% of the people with substance abuse problems also have major clinical depression. Now, possibly there could be countless more. What I think is, although they term it as a causes, these are really a correlations actually. Because if they were to be a true cause, then everyone going through those causes would see the sign of depression. But not everyone going through these events go through depression. So, in my opinion, these are merely a correlations. These are not
These
really
are
the
risk
actual
factors.
causes.
These are risk factors that can potentially cause.
Risk factor, you can term it, but let's classify our causes in two categories, right? One category is the absolute cause. Absolute cause is when the cause exists, the effect is there. Effect is there by default. There if there is a cause, there will be a defect. That's called absolute ultimate cause. In Jain terminology, you can call it upadhan karan. That a cause and effect reside simultaneously. And then there are causes which are instrumental causes, external causes, which may or may not basically be there. Basically, so instrumental causes are more like if the effect takes place, and if there is a external circumstances around it, then since the effect took place around it, you term it. You just merely term it as a correlation as a instrumental relationship. But there is no guaranteed relationship. It's kind of like when someone gains a knowledge, either teacher could be there or a book would be there. But teacher doesn't have to be there. But a person's ability to learn, the knowledge attribute has to be there. The ability to learn is what do you call upadhan karan or absolute cause. Because without that, no learning will ever take place. But that book or teacher is an instrumental cause. Because that may or may not be there, and if the learning takes place, then that is termed as a basically one of the factors that because of them we learn. So similarly here, these all of these things actually, none of them imply that person will definitely go into depression. Like abuse, I mean, many people may have gone through abuse and still may not have gone experienced depression, perhaps. Medications, Colin, does everyone taking medications experience depression, Pritesh?
No.
No.
High risk.
Conflict. Conflict. Yeah, Pritesh, you were saying something? Sorry.
Yeah. So there is a high risk, but not everybody goes through depression.
Not everyone goes through it. Correct. So if person goes through a depression at that time, and if that person was taking that medication, then you would rather say that yeah, most likely this medication caused a depression. Would that be would that be fair? Would that be fair to say?
Say that again.
Would that be a fair statement? If that person was taking that medication at that time, and if he entered into a depression, then you might correlate it together and say most likely because of this medication the person entered into depression.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if someone already has signs of depression, this will make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
But someone who does not have any signs of depression before the start of medication, they can also become severely depressed to the point that they can commit suicide.
Yes, yes. So to me it seems like it's more like a correlation. It's not an actual causation because not everyone goes through it.
Right.
He may or may not go through it, and if he does go through it, then you term it that yeah, it's most likely because of this. So it's more like a correlation. It's not the actual causation here. Then a conflict, depression in someone who has the biological vulnerability to develop depression may result from personal conflict or disputes with family members. So now, also yes, a lot of people go through depression when they are in conflict, but again, not everyone goes through depression. Because if that was the case, that conflict was the ultimate cause, then whoever is in the conflict should go into depression. But that is not the case. There is something else. A person either does go into the depression or doesn't. And conflict just resides, merely happens to be an external factor that is correlated to it. So again, that's again a correlation. It's not an actual cause. Similarly, death or loss of a loved one, that's again a same thing. Not everyone who goes through death of loved one goes into depression. Some people are surprisingly calm and equanimous, and they deal with the that loss in a very positive or constructive manner. That they don't really go through those negative thoughts, although they may really feel the sadness because of the family member, but it's not that we call it a depression at level. Now, next is let me, before we go into genetics part, let me go into the major events. Again, starting a new job, graduating, getting married. This one also doesn't lead everyone to depression. Also, some people are going through it. There would be depression. Some people who are not. Other personal problems, same thing. Serious illness, again, it's the same. Not everyone. Pritesh, how many percent would you attribute that someone who is going through serious illness, that how many percent of those people really go into depression?
I do not know the statistic, uh, so I really cannot tell. And sometimes it's kind of a chicken or egg question. Many people are depressed, and it becomes more apparent, versus some people become depressed because of the illness. So I don't know the number, but I can find it out if you want me to.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. We are just curious. But what I want to again mention here is, again, the serious illness is also correlation, not a causation, right? Again, and medical science as well as Jainism both agrees that correlation is not necessarily a causation.
Right.
They both say that. So I think everyone can agree, even serious illness and depression, it's merely a correlation. It's not a causation, because not everyone goes through it.
That is pretty much everything in the medicine field.
But here's the thing though. When would medical science define something as a causation versus correlation? Is there a criteria for it?
So, in everywhere they will call it as they don't say correlation. Correlation term has a different meaning because of statistics part.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't use word correlation. They use cause and or risk factor. But correlation word is not used. Now, even if someone has genes to have bad disease, then there is something called as expression of the gene. Not
Mm-hmm.
everyone expresses that gene. Penetrance is something is called. Even if you express, then you may not express it fully, or you may express it partially. So even if you have that bad gene that can give you that potential disease,
Mm-hmm.
you may not express it, or you even may express it partially. So you may not have the full blown disease. You may just have partial disease.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Pretty much, there is nothing in medicine that is per Jain cause. Like if there is a cause, there has to be effect. Pretty much, there is nothing in medicine that you have. If you have that cause, you will have that effect.
Okay. So let me put it.
Except some genes that will definitely give you 100% result.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, in that case, we can say that modern medical science has no framework regarding the absolute cause of the illness, in specifically in depression. Case of depression, if I'm not talking about other problems quite yet, but at least in a
Yeah.
psychological issues, we don't have a framework or a category, something like absolute cause that will 100% yield an effect.
So they generally divide three things: host, environment, and pathogen or external problem. So these three come together, and they say that when these three come together in certain proportion, you might see the disease in a patient. So it's multifactorial always, for the most part actually, and these three are the factors majorly playing roles.
But so even in the pathogen thing, what I'm thinking is it's more like a correlation to a person's thought process, right? Ultimately, modern medical science says that there is some relation. It means chemistry, that when people remain in stress for a long period of time, it alters their brain structure in some ways. There is some research going on in modern medical science right now, about understanding how brain changes when a person is under tremendous stress for a long period of time. But even this is an external phenomena, right? But there is no absolute cause, right? They say that yes, combination of these things. Has there been that combination defined anywhere, that when this combination exists, it has to have a depression?
Yeah, as I said, nothing is absolute.
Yeah, okay. So then it is safe to say, right, that modern medical science has no category of absolute causes, at least in a state of depression.
Sure.
So only category that they call it a risk factor. It's just an instrumental cause.
Right.
So then, although modern medical science doesn't use that term correlation because it's used statistical as a statistical term, we can, from Jain terminology, we can say that all the causes that modern medical science mentioned are specifically just the correlations. They're just the risk factors, actually. They're nothing that will definitely cause a depression. But here, Jainism goes one step further and mentions things that, if they're present, they will definitely cause depression. And those are the causes given in the thought process: the wrong belief, wrong conduct, and wrong knowledge. Now, we may say that, okay, many people have mithyatva, many people have wrong belief, many people have kashayas. Not everyone has a depression. So everyone has a potential for depression there. And only when that person really truly exercises that potential and really goes down to that path by not controlling his thought process, that's when he enters into depression. There is a mechanism to it. But one thing that you will definitely find is, when a person has a depression, he will have an incorrect thought process. That is for sure. There will never be a case of depression where the incorrect thought process will not be there and the other risk factors are there. And simply because of the external risk factor, the person goes into depression. So then the uh, absolute cause of depression here is the incorrect thought process. Priyanka, would you agree to that?
Yes, but I don't know what were you talking about like before, but yes, if when someone is in depression, there is a wrong belief behind it.
Wrong belief is always there, and also level of kasha is at the point where it's so intense and so continuous that it's termed as a depression in a clinical terms, probably state of hopelessness. If we look at
Your
it,
voice is breaking.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. So if you look at it, it starts way below. Suppose,
Your voice.
hey, can you hear me now, Priyanka? Priyanka, you may want to check internet from your side. Looks like it maybe slower. What I was trying to say is that depression is a specific intense condition that medical science studies, but there are so many precursor and previous stages that they are not really being paid attention to, and that's what Jainism goes into. That every one of us, as long as we have a wrong thought process, wrong belief, and kashayas, and wrong knowledge, we have potential to get into depression. And if we don't control our thought process, and if that external event or so-called risk factor occurs, takes place in our life, then and if we don't really watch out for our thought process at that time, we do enter into the depression. And then initially we enter into the state of grief in this particular case, what we were saying. But then it can take form of depression when it becomes more intense. So truly saying, only true cause of depression is uh, incorrect thought process. Everything else is just a risk factor or instrumental cause. Now, I want to basically point out one other thing. Here, people are talking about genetics. That, okay, if someone has those type of genes, then it can basically lead one to depression. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Pritesh, is that uh, So, does someone who goes through depression, would there always be a genetic issue behind it?
There is always
Or
what issue?
say it again.
What what was
Genetic issue. If someone goes into depression,
not
is it necessary that he had some genetic issue and that's why he went into depression, or he can go into depression without genetics?
well, there are two things. First of all, we don't know everybody's genetics. First, we don't know everybody's family history. Even the patient does not know their family history.
Mm-hmm.
Many, actually. But so far, it's not been the case that everybody has family history.
Okay.
I mean, everybody has genetic involvement.
Okay.
I mean, with limited understanding about genetics in current world,
Mm-hmm.
we don't know.
Now, there are two things here I want to talk about. I want to talk about genetics as well as biological factors. Some brain chemistry coming together and leading to depression. Okay? Now, let's examine the mechanism of depression in a little more detail. What happens is, persons, due to some external event that takes place, and at that time, person's inability to cope with it because of the incorrect thought process or the approach towards the situation, person starts having negative thoughts. And what happens is, whenever we have a negative or positive thought, we have two choices. Either we can agree with it, we can not agree with it. A lot of times in Jainism we say that, okay, when thoughts come, don't get attached to it or don't get involved in it. Just purely observe it. What do we mean by purely observe it and not being involved in it? Basically, in simplest term, sometimes thoughts come out of nowhere, right? You didn't really want to think about something, but some thought came to your mind. Because that is because, according to Jainism, mind in itself is a micro organ, and it is also puddal. And depending upon the changes in karmic bondage, different puddal will be generated into mind, different particles, and that will create different type of thoughts. That is not necessarily that something. Thought in its purest sense is not something that we control, but the feeling, the reaction to that thought, whether we agree to it or not agree to it, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether we want to do it, whether we don't want to do it, feelings to it is something that it's in our control. Or to perceive the thought as a good or bad or harmful, not harmful, or to perceive the objects of thought. Then suppose we had the thought about some person we don't like, and the object of that thought is that other person. And then when we think that, no, I don't like that person, he's going to harm me or not harm me or whatever, that's basically a type of involvement. So reaction to that thought, agreement or disagreement, that's basically our choice. So here, if there are, even if we assume for a minute that there are genetic issues or biological issues, at the most, all it can do is trigger the onset of negative thoughts into a mind. So that doesn't necessarily mean that person has to go into depression, because if that's the case, every person going into the negative thought process will have to go into depression. And that visuals, what happens is, once that cycle starts, we have negative thoughts, and then in response, we get the negative feelings. Again, negative thoughts come, and we enter into more negative feelings. If this was a continuous cycle, and if there was a mandatory relationship between them, the person will never come out of it. The person has to go through it, and it's a vicious cycle that will never be broken. That is not the case. We do see people recovering from it. We do see people countering negative thoughts too and not going into depression. So even these biological events or this genetic risk factors, all it can do is trigger the onset of negative thoughts in the body, or negative some sort of situation that a person may dislike in body. But it does not necessarily it's not a rule that a person has to go to a depression because of that. So even genetics or biological reasons, what I'm trying to prove is that even genetics or biological reasons are also a risk factor or an instrumental cause according to genetics. Risk factor according to the medical science. It's not the absolute cause. The absolute cause is one that has to exist is along with this risk factors, there has to be an incorrect thought process. So if there is an incorrect thought process, then there are countless events, not just these outlined in this list. There can be so many other countless events that can lead person into depression. We can't even count. There can be so many different events occurring in everyone's life. But if there is no incorrect process, thought process, incorrect, wrong belief, wrong conduct, and wrong knowledge, then none of these risk factors will lead person into the depression. So ultimately, the cause of depression, only the right thought process can offer the ultimate defense for the depression, according to Jainism. You have anything to say here?
No, you're right.
Okay. So with that, we talked about the general causes that medical science proves. All of them are basically limit currents, but the real cause is basically this thought process, and that's what we studied last time. That okay, shock is there, but then shock is what everyone realizes in this scenario, that when there is someone's death, we can experience grief and sadness. There are so many more kashas that we may not even realize that they may be there, and everyone may be different. Not everyone may go through this kashas, but it depends on what people are thinking. They may or may not go through this kashas. So fear of being alone. Who will, we may have thoughts like, who will give me company now? Who will I be with? Fear of survival. How will I live without him or her? How will I survive? What will I eat? Who will take care of me? Fear of society. How will other people treat me now? Will people take advantage of me now? Or what about my status in the society? Will people give me the same respect? So these are some of the thoughts that may come to, which are related to fear, which is one of the Nakashayas or pseudo passions. And Rati, attachment, pleasure in external objects, intense attachment towards loved one. I cannot imagine my life without the loved one. I like his or her. I like him or her very much. This is attachment. We cannot. We have so much attachment towards that person that we are not able to accept the loss. And I never wanted to be separated from my loved one. That's there. Arati. So disinterest in the daily activities and family life and social life, that is basically arati towards external objects there. Hasya, that doesn't apply in this situation. Jugupsha, disgust about the present circumstances of losing someone and not seeing the hope in life. And then also Purushved, Srived, Napusankved, sexual passions don't apply here. Again, kashas, anger towards the circumstances, that why did this happen to me? A lot of times when something happens, we start asking question, why did people who believe in God may say, why did God did this to me? Or some people may think, why did this only happen to me? Why am I in this situation? And blaming someone for external situation depending upon how things played out about the death of the loved one. Sometimes people may start blaming others for it. Possibly thought of taking revenge if death occurred due to some other reasons besides natural death. If it was, someone did a murder or something, there may be a possibly thought of taking revenge. Possibly thought of being suppressed. Might think that people are going to suppress me now. People are not going to listen to me now because my loved one is not there, was able to control the situation, things like that. The ego, status in the society. If someone's loved one was so and so at a very high position in society, when they lost, some people may have just, some of these kashas we don't even realize. So maybe status about society, that okay, what will be my status? Who will listen to me? People's attitude and behavior towards ourselves, that okay, how will people perceive me? Now I'm no longer a wife of a minister or whatnot, so things like that. Deceit probably may doesn't apply here in this case. Greed for loved ones present, And greed for status and possession, income and livelihood. That's a type of greed. So this was what we covered last time. Anything you would like to add to this list of kashayas and nokashayas? For Priyanka, is there anything you would like to add?
No, I think this is all.
And then this kashayas and nokashayas exist on the foundation of wrong beliefs, which is oneness with our own body, minus with our loved ones, possessions, doership, we can control or save external objects. These are general concepts that we have in our mind. They're wrong beliefs. Suffering through external situation, that this situation is making me feel unhappy. Uh, my loved one was mine. No, it's okay to say that we are going to use statements, right? That he's my loved one, or this is my property and stuff like that. That's only for worldly transactions and communications. If we truly believe it as ours in absolute permanent sense, then we are going to suffer. So that's a wrong belief. And wrong knowledge is about we at that point in time we are thinking that whatever if I count myself, I'm prepared for this is my family, my loved one, or mine. Will stay with me for as long as I want, or wishing that they will stay with me for as long as I want. Doership, I could not do anything to save my loved one. Sometimes people are in a lot of grief because they feel like they could not do anything to save their loved ones, right? And that's a doership. If we have a concept that we can save other person's life, uh, and we are in charge, and we are going to think that, I could not do anything to save my loved one's life. And that's why sometimes they go into depression for that reason, thinking with that thought. Suffering, I cannot live without my loved one. This incident has caused a lot of damage to my life. Feeling that I'm being suffered due to this incident. Obviously, there will be a worldly life impact, right? If your loved one was only source of your livelihood, probably that may be a big impact. That doesn't necessarily mean that existence, uh, your whole existence is dependent upon that in an absolute sense. So those are the wrong knowledge. And then external behavior is a crying, weeping, possibly blaming, on all the symptoms that we just covered earlier. Disinterest in eating, disinterest in physical activities, excessive sleep, overeating or not eating, state of hopeless or sadness. It can lead to suicide if it's an extreme case. Minor depression can last 2 days or weeks, and major depression can last up to years or lifetime. So this is the entire thought process of a person who is in the depression. The next thing we should do is we should look at the opposite of this thought process, and find what is the right type of thinking, or what is the right thinking in this particular sense. If we had a kashaya, the opposite of that kashaya would be the right type of reaction. And that's the ideal reaction. So first, we will try to identify what are that states, and then we will discuss later how if we are in a negative thought process, then how to basically correct that thought process and basically go into the right direction. So let's go through this. Sure. By the way, let me just write some of the right responses in reaction to the kashayas. So what is the opposite of anger?
Shama.
Kama. Also, just write English. Forgiveness. What is the opposite of ego? It's called Mardhav in Jainism, but we will call it a humility.
Yeah.
And then ego, deceit. What's the opposite of deceit? It's called
Straightforward. Saralta.
Yeah, Sarartha or Arjo. In Jain terms, it's called Arjo, but we will call it a straightforwardness. And then Lobh or greed,
Satisfaction, santosh.
satisfaction. Okay.
So
And all these Naukashas, all of them, there is no individual opposite to it. In just one word you can call it equanimity, basically. I mean, ultimately, all these four are also aspect of equanimity, because equanimity includes all of them actually. But there is no one-to-one direct no opposite to Naukasha, basically. We can say it's equanimity. Basically, it's one state that covers them all, opposite to all Naukashas, basically. So then, this is the right thing to do, basically. That not to engage in kashaya and remain equanimous, remain calm, to remain completely positive. Equanimity is not a state of emptiness. Okay, a lot of people think of it as a state of emptiness. Actually, a state filled with complete joy and a pleasure, but that's independent of any external objects or anything whatsoever. It doesn't depend on anything. It depends on solely the correct thought process or right belief, right conduct, and right knowledge. So that is a state that we want to go into. We don't want nikashayas. We don't want grief. Eliminate, I would say, eliminate grief, fear, attachment, aversion. What else was there? Jugupta, which is disgust. What else did we cover up? Pretty much that's it. And boy, fear. Fear already counted. Okay. These are the ones that they apply here. We want to get rid of these ones, right? Because ultimately, reason it first we are going to talk about the prevention of depression, right? When person is not into it. Because then what we will do is once we go through this thought process of how to even in modern medical science, it's always good to learn about prevention first, rather than being in that situation and then trying to find out, okay, what can I do to come out of it. So first, we are saying that we should eliminate these feelings if they are arising in us, because if they are not eliminated or somehow controlled, they can eventually lead us into depression, all these things. So then we will talk about that first. Okay, so now let's see. Let me ask you, if you have a if you have a feeling of grief at that time, obviously you're not going to be able to just jump on it and just instantly come out of it and go into the state of meditation, like state of complete atma dhyan, like Arihant Bhagwan or Siddha Bhagwan has, or any Muni has. It doesn't happen. You can't jump like that. It doesn't work. No one can jump that far. So then what can we do at the instant so that this free fall into the grief or fear can be arrested and we can basically try to bring ourselves out of it? What can we do? Ritesh, Priyanka, what can we think at that moment? We have a tremendous grief because we just lost our loved one at that point in time. What can we do? What can we think?
lot of things we can think, but identifying yourself separate from even your body separate from your soul, identifying the nitya bhavanas. I mean, all the 12 bhavanas, you can identify any of the bhavana and it can help you separate yourself and focus on your own soul. Um, Remembering karma theory, all the things that we have learned, if you pick any which one and focus on it, it can help you.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. I think that makes sense. Now, one thing, so any concept you take from Jainism probably could help you here, in avoiding grief. It's just we need to come out of that cycle of, just negative, being involved in negative feelings, and just start some contemplation here. That's all it takes. But the specific contemplation that I want to talk about here may help is if you think about the concept of soul and think that okay, death is not the end of that loved one. It's not the end of existence. It's simply a, a change of body, basically. So the death, it's a death. Thinking that it's a death of a body and not a loved one would probably help. Because then, if we think of as a death, a lot of times most people subconsciously think of as at the end of it. Although in words we say that yes, they are born reborn somewhere or whatever. A lot of times we say that we don't believe it that way or we don't take it that way. So it's not it's basically not a loss of existence, not a loss of existence.
It's because it's
Simply,
because we think that we won't be able to meet him or her like in our lifetime again.
that's correct. That's correct. That is certainly right. It's an extension of a situation that I'm about to describe, right? When in India, a lot of people come here for student visas, right, from India. When their son goes away, I mean, they know that they're not going to be able to meet their son for many, many years, probably sometimes 2, 3, 4 years, sometimes for a year. I mean, so it's an extension that, yeah, now they will never be able to see it in their lifetime. That doesn't mean, at least to those parents, at least knowing that their son is alive and their son is in a good condition and their son is progressing in life will give them a lot of satisfaction in life. If they had not known that, if they think that their son or daughter is in trouble, or they're having tough time, then probably they will feel a lot bad. They will feel really bad about it. But as long as they know that she is progressing, he's there, he's in good shape, will continue to progress, then they won't really worry as much. You agree with that, Priyanka?
Yeah, right. Hmm.
Similar thing, if you can take a perspective here that okay, yes, I may not ever be able to see it in my lifetime because that's just the law of nature, but doesn't mean that he's not there. It's just a progression of life, progression of life basically. And think about this. Jainism actually takes a very different perspective towards death. It asks people to use the death as a celebration. Mrityu Mahotsav. Call it just like we say Janma Mahotsav, there is Mrityu Mahotsav. The Mahotsav. Because think about it, if there would not be a death in life, think about it. Body would keep growing old and old and old, and one point you feel that the body is not capable of doing anything, and there's simply no way to get rid of it. You have simply nowhere to come out of it. That is, it's a death is basically kind of a boon. It's a process of regeneration, basically. And if we take person as a consciousness, then we know that a person is going to exist, and not only exist, he's going to progress as per his values in life, and it's just a life at a place where we don't really see it. So don't see it as an end of existence, but see it simply as a progression in life. Then it will help us avoid grief. That's one way of doing it. Not saying that's the only thought you can do, only contemplation you can do. There are many things, as Pritesh mentioned. Anything that you take from Jain philosophy would probably help. Then next is avoiding fear. Priyanka, how do we avoid fear? What can we think?
We won't be fearful if we have the belief that uh, that's the one who has gone could have helped me, or I cannot survive without him.
Yeah, so here thinking about our own self would definitely help. That look, just like
Yeah.
he's a consciousness, I am also a consciousness.
And I'm complete in myself.
Yeah, and I'm complete in myself. My existence is complete in myself.
And I'm not dependent on
It
anyone
doesn't
else.
depend upon anyone. Depend upon anyone. And there may be a genuine fears about livelihood in life, and that's okay. Certainly no one denies that. And that's the other problem, but that doesn't necessarily mean that my existence will be wiped out or I cannot survive. So when we think about our own self, and when we think our own self as a complete in our own self, and then also at that time thinking about this, that grief doesn't do anything, doesn't help us, doesn't help other person. It just makes us more and more unhappy. Similarly, fear doesn't help. It's not going to do anything constructive. Fear is not going to take away the risks that I face in my life. Rather, if I think constructively like this, then it will help me find solutions, think about solutions of the practical implications of a death of the loved one in my life. Then. So, thinking about our own self as a consciousness. And again, think about this. What you're doing is, in a way, you are doing a process of Ved Vigyan. Through this contemplation, you are separating yourself from the external things in a conscious thought process. So, isn't it a Ved Vigyan, Priyanka?
Come again?
Yeah, what I'm saying is, in a way, through this contemplation, all you're doing is a type of Ved Vigyan, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Ultimately, you are separating yourself in your knowledge from things that you are not. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what we are doing. Then let's see what else. Attachment. Okay, here things like bara bhavnas that help a lot. So one of the bhavana is anitya bhavana.
Nothing is permanent.
Yeah, impermanence or non-permanent. Yeah, transitoriness. Okay, or transitory nature, transitory. So everything in nature, all the states or paryay uh, are transitory. Everything is temporary in nature. Nothing lasts permanent, including this body, which is a temporary state, lifetime, things like that. So there is no point of having an attachment here. Yes, we are going to have attachment, but if we think about these aspects, the permanent thing that who we are is the consciousness. Only consciousness is permanent. Now,
In this
consciousness
case, this is the root cause of like all everything.
for us, yes, yes. This is actually root cause. And other thing is, one may argue that yes, from a substance point of view, everything is permanent, right? Only
Mm-hmm.
state is temporary. But if you think about our point of view, from our point of view, only our consciousness lives with
It's
us for all
permanent.
the time, right? Everyone else consciousness may exist in the world, but that's not going to stay with us. So
Right.
for us, from our point of view, only our consciousness is permanent to us. That's why this attachment doesn't help. It just makes us more and more unhappy. Attachment is not going to bring our loved one back. So that is why when we think about different bhavanas, uh, another one is Ashrana bhavana, that nothing can prevent death, nothing can save a person from death. Uh, so only way to basically save oneself, not necessarily from death, but a fear of death, is Ashrana bhavana. When we think of our consciousness, which can never die, which can never be harmed, which can never be destroyed, which can never be degraded, that permanent consciousness is the ultimate support. It's the ultimate thing that can give us relief in life, and that's why we should think of ourselves as consciousness. So that will help us avoid this attachment and aversion and disgust, basically. Does that make sense, Priyanka?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're at 11 o'clock. We will just continue the scenario next time. Next time we will talk about the right beliefs. And then we will, if there are any other questions about this depression scenario, then we can cover that as well. Okay. Any other questions?
No questions.
Okay. Right. So we'll continue next time. Jai Jinendra, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank
Jai
you.
Sri Ram.